Hello, welcome to Loremaster's Lair. I'm the Loremaster, and welcome to Monster Month Week 2, where we deal with another big-name monster, the vampire. As opposed to lycanthropes, vampires have much less official members to their name, but that does not mean they lack variety, especially when you start getting to members which are not true vampires. But enough with the intro. Let's sink our fangs into the meat of this video. Vampires, as a class of creature, are a type of undead who feed off the vital essence of others, the European classic example being blood. The modern vampire is based off a variety of these from Eastern Europe, specifically a few around the area of Romania. These ones form the backbone of their identity, used to craft several books in the 1800s, including the 1819 Vampire, the 1872 Camilla, and of course, the 1897 Dracula. Of course, this central modern idea of the vampire is not the only example, and works of fiction like Pathfinder draw inspiration from other classic examples across the world to add to the variety. On Golarion, true vampires all had the specific origin of the Strigoi, who originated on a plane of shadows. To adapt to our world, they started trying to take on a variety of forms. The first attempts were brought about the Nosferatu, but as they recognized the terror of immortal life without eternal youth, the Strigoi instead began transitioning to another, more youthful form, the Moroi. However, others were not so keen on either of the blood drinkers. Some tried sleeping for eternity to escape their appetite, but instead woke famished, as the half-mad versions of the first Jing Shi. Others tried instead to more efficiently drain the essence which makes up life. Eventually, some found ways to more perfectly drain it directly through memory, and became the first Vitala. And so the Strigoi disappeared from history, and the four forms of true vampire were born. Now, having said that, let's go through each one by one. First are the Strigoi, named for the Romanian example which started it all. These are the original vampires who come from the plane of shadows. Here's the thing though, they all started as shadowy beings. They required a host to have a physical form, and a ritual was developed during ancient times in order to bind them to a humanoid form. The thing is, the ritual has been lost to time, and as you heard above, most Strigoi developed over time into the other lines of vampires. At this time, it is thought Strigoi are extinct, or at the very least, extremely rare. So now for the main 4/5, the first of which are Nosferatu. These creatures are based on the more classic idea of the vampires in Europe, thought to have come about by people seeing corpses in early stages of decomposition. And decomposition is what the Nosferatu are all about. They live forever, but are not forever young, meaning they must suffer on through eternity as their skin grows taut, their hair and teeth fall out, their forms begin dehydrating. Needless to say, among the true vampire, these are the ones whose actions are most like that of a wild beast. Not that they are not cautious, of course. They are extremely hard to track down, made all the more so by the fact that Nosferatu cannot make more of themselves, and therefore they do everything they can not to die. They spend time researching a way to cure themselves, these being the only true vampire whose it's more common to see someone trying to cure themselves. But considering that they cannot stand to see their decay reflected in another, they are continuously doing research by themselves, where collaboration with others of the kind may help them realize their dream. Moroi, on the other hand, are more than capable of making more of their own. The representation of the modern vampire, a la Bram Stoker's Dracula, they are the vampires most likely to be described as beautiful. Not that doing so is wise, of course. Despite centuries of adding a sense of romantic undertone to what they do, feeding is feeding. And they are experts at taking the amount of blood they want. They can keep their cattle alive, turn it into another Moroi, or turn it into a lesser vampire spawn which you use as tools. And of course, the air of refinement is just a trap. The same snare which has caught countless pawns into their fangs. Despite the hunt being seen as beneath them, they are the same soulless hunters as the others. The only difference is presentation. Third, we have the Jing Shi. Based off of the Chinese hopping vampire, these creatures are usually associated with Tian Shi. However, they can arise everywhere where there are certain creatures who sleep in tombs for centuries, stewing in obsession, before rising as undead. These creatures craft talismans which they affix to their faces, usually the Eastern Fulu. But they have been known to be created in a variety of traditions. The only requirement is that it ends up stuck to the face, and that its powers are anti-magic. The Jing Shi are masters at reading omens, and are always on the lookout for a variety of signs in order to feed their obsession, regardless of what or who it is. Usually, these symbols tell them how many or which certain people to drain the life force of. So some whisper it is all just an excuse for their hunting. But you will die pretty quickly if a Jing Shi hears you say so. And fourth, we have a Talus. Based on an Indian creature, these come about when a child is not buried in hollowed ground. It rises as a vampire with the ability to both steal the memories of others and take over the bodies of corpses. This becomes the greatest strength, as it can make a mass grave somewhere to hide their real body, while also using the others as backup bodies which defend themselves. This is also how they reproduce, by lying a child's body among the mass of corpses. They become almost guaranteed to rise as another Vitala. When they eat memories, they sometimes are affected by those experiences, and it is not uncommon for Vitala to reach spiritual enlightenment after eating the mind of a monk or wise man. Not that it stops the need to eat, of course, but still. But we have one more true vampire outside of those descended from the Strigoi. Or at least as far as we know. Don't know all the experimenting the Strigoi did. These are psychic vampires, also known as Vitala Rani, due to the similarities to Vitala. To the point they might be retconning into the same creature now in 2E, but the current adventure path is still using Vitala, so we're still counting them as separate. Psychic vampires are born when those with strong psychic powers die, but refuse to pass on. Their powers reanimating their corpses into creatures that feed off the sanity of others. Despite being a vampire, they lack many of the hallmark traits of vampirism, and the most sunlight does is show that they are unhuman. It doesn't hurt them at all. The only known weakness being that they are weak against creatures who do not fear them. And now we find ourselves with the final creature considered true vampires, Dhampir, which it is good to see that vampires acknowledge their children enough for them to be counted among the true vampires. These creatures need no explanations. These are the typical half-vampire found in various sources of media. The only difference is that Pathfinder settings there'll be more vampires than just Moroi, and that there are more halves than just human. We are done with true vampires, but that does not mean that we explored all bloodsuckers in Pathfinder. Starting with Penang Golan, originally from Malaysian tales. These creatures appear as normal mortal women during the day. However, at night, they detach their heads from their body, flying around with their internal organs trailing behind them, searching for fresh blood to drink. They are also known for making a ticking sound when flying, giving them the nickname of tick-ticks, which, ironically, ticks are also known as pretty nasty bloodsuckers, so it fits. Next on the list is an air classic, the Virkolakos, named for vampire creatures from Greece. These creatures take the form of apes without skin, being simply sinew and muscle. They also lack some of the higher brain functions of true vampires, but they do have some interesting, unique traits. Disease. Vampires have long been associated with disease, and this creature represents that, spreading a plague which is not just deadly, but turns those killed by it into Eder Virkolakos. Their main weakness is that once a week, it being Sunday/Saturday, they need to bury themselves in their old graves, limiting their ability to travel far distances, and trapping them in one spot for 24 hours on a regular basis. The next two we have are part of a trend. First is Sayona, also known as weeping vampires, named for the famed vengeful spirit from Latin America. These are creatures who covet youth they have lost, constantly looking for creatures to drain the blood of and bathe in, bringing temporary beauty back to their rivered skin before their stream of bloody tears takes away their beauty. The other is the Bay Triove, based loosely on Elizabeth Bathory, or at least the false accusations raised against her. These are a little kind of a court vampire like the Valoronis, and they keep themselves alive and forever young by binding themselves to a self-created well of blood, which they need to continue periodically bathing in. We're almost done, but there is one more left, from the distant pages of Starfinder. We have seen vampires descended from the Strigoi and the Plane of Shadows. We have seen vampires with occult connections. But what about the negative energy plane? Dying in front of a Skeldunar, or in the presence of a large amount of negative energy, will have a chance of spawning a void shard vampire. Unlike most undead, the Skeldunar do not kill them on sight, just mocking them, because they are creatures who are infused with both a deep loneliness, which will lead them to spawn more of themselves, as well as an uncontrollable need to destroy, resulting in them lashing out at all technology, or the wielders of that technology, when in its presence. And if they manage to kill the Skeldunar responsible for their birth, the vampires become what is known as a void crystal vampire, incredibly strong in comparison, and with deep desires to rule large portions of the galaxy, potentially plunging it into the void themselves. Finally, let's end with a deity, or deities, because vampires are spoiled for choice in that matter. There is, of course, Ugathora, like all undead. Zon-Kuthon is also a popular choice when you are not a fan of the sun. Demon-wise, we have Zora, a princess of Aslant who had debauched parties and who now serves as a demon lord of cannibalism, blood, and vampires. If instead you prefer devils, there is Infernal Duke Lokan of Blood, Rebirth, and the Undeath, and his rival, Blood Emperor Ruthven, who, while not an Infernal Duke, has some sway in hell for being the third vampire ever. It does not say what kind, but with those stats I have to assume Strigoi. Other choices include Calistria, the most non-evil you can expect of a vampire, Fumiyoshi and Yanxing from Tianxi, Dolive from Vudra, Mahatala for those who prefer female devils to male, and Zamandor, because why not add a great old one to the mix? And that brings us to the end of today's episode. If you noticed, both these first weeks were monsters with their own dedicated books in one ear, which I took the most of the information on, plus added outside information to make these videos. So as many of you probably guessed, next week is Hags, and they're a diverse color palette. I can guarantee you something is going to be brewing. So hope you stop by for a spell next time.